For centuries, the Western world has portrayed Osiris as a mere god of death, ruler of tombs, judge of the underworld, a silent figure among ancient ruins. But in Kemet, the land we now call Egypt, his name was not Osiris at all. He was known as Usir, the consciousness of life's continuity, the rhythm of creation, death, and rebirth itself. Usir was not a god of endings. He was the principle of restoration, the invisible current linking what is seen with what is unseen. Before Greece, before Rome, before the philosophers of the Mediterranean dared to ask what life truly was, the priests of Kemet already knew. They understood a truth that modern civilization still struggles to grasp. Nothing ever truly ends. Everything transforms, everything renews, everything returns. In the sacred language of the Nile, that truth had a name, Usir, spoken with reverence, carved into stone, and whispered in temples for millennia. But who was he really? And what did he represent before history rewrote him? Long before the Greeks arrived and rebranded his name, Usir embodied a philosophy far deeper than any later mythology could contain. He was not a person, nor a deity of death. He was a cosmic principle, the law of transformation and balance that holds the universe together. In the most ancient texts of Kemet, the pyramid texts, inscribed thousands of years before any European set foot on African soil, Usir appears not as a corpse king but as the primordial force of renewal, inseparable from Ma'at, the cosmic order, truth, and balance that sustains all creation. Without Ma'at, there can be no continuity. Without Usir, no renewal. Every symbol carved beside his name carried meaning. The green and black of his skin represented not decay, but fertility and rebirth, the green of sprouting vegetation and the black of fertile Nile silt, the earth's dark womb where life begins again. The linen wrappings of his body were not shrouds of death but cocoons of transformation, where matter dissolves only to emerge renewed. The crook he carried represented mastery over the forces of change. The flail symbolized the separation of what must be left behind from what must endure, the eternal act of purification through transformation. Usir was not mythology, he was metaphysics made visible. He was the rhythm of the Nile, whose yearly flood brought life back to parched soil. The people of Kemet didn't just worship the river, they experienced it as Usir himself, dying beneath the sun's heat, reborn in the rising waters, reborn in the green of the harvest. Even the moon, waxing, waning, and returning, was seen as a reflection of his mystery. For them, death was not an end, but a womb. Darkness was not absence, but gestation. Just as the Nile returned each year, so too did life, spirit, and essence. Usir was not the god of death, he was the teacher of transformation, of how to fragment and reunite, how to descend and emerge stronger. When colonizers and Western historians redefined him as Osiris, they strip him of this depth, reducing him to a shadow of his true form, a lord of the dead. But in truth, Usir transcended all dualities. He was the force that ensures that when all forms perish, essence remains. Every ritual, every hymn, every festival of Usir was not about mourning death, but celebrating life's return. During the flooding of the Nile, people mold figures of Usir from mud and grain, watered them, and watched them sprout. From his dark body, green shoots emerged, a visible miracle, proof that life always returns. This was not myth. It was spiritual science, a reflection of ecological truth. The Kemetic people saw that every seed must die to bring forth a plant, that every ending hides a beginning. To resist death was to resist life itself. Usir's mystery was the cycle of becoming, creation, dissolution, renewal, repeated endlessly. And this knowledge did not die with Kemet. It crossed oceans and centuries, surviving enslavement and colonization, carried in chants, rituals, and songs by those who refuse to forget. Because Usir cannot die. He is the law of continuity, encoded in the spiritual DNA of Africa and beyond, the reminder that everything, from rivers to civilizations to souls, moves in cycles of transformation. In a world obsessed with permanence, with fear of loss and change, Usir's message echoes louder than ever. To live is to die 1,000 small deaths. To die is to transform. And to transform is to return, greater, deeper, eternal. The mystery of Usir, death, fragmentation, and rebirth. As long as there is life, as long as there is death, and as long as there is transformation, Usir remains the reigning principle, not over tombs, but over the very matrix of existence. Among all the sacred narratives of ancient Kemet, none is as profound or as misunderstood as the story of his murder by his brother Set, his dismemberment, and his restoration through the divine love and power of his sister wife, Aset. Western retellings have reduced this myth to a tragic tale of jealousy and revenge, painting Set as the villain and Usir as the innocent victim. But this interpretation, shaped by a linear, dualistic worldview, misses entirely the initiatic essence of the story, the map of spiritual transformation hidden within. In the African symbolic tradition, Set was never simply evil. He represented chaos, disruption, and necessary fragmentation, the breaking force without which renewal could never occur. Set was the desert wind and the scorching drought, the destructive energy that clears the way for rebirth. In this sacred drama, Set and Usir are not enemies locked in eternal war. They are complementary powers in a cosmic dance, thesis and antithesis giving birth to synthesis. The storm and the flood, destruction and creation, separation and reunion, each is part of a greater rhythm that keeps the universe alive. When Set dismembers Usir and scatters his 14, or 42, pieces across the land of Kemet, it is not merely an act of violence, it is a symbolic teaching about the fragmentation of the human soul. The ancient sages saw the human being not as a single entity but as a collection of forces, the Ka, vital essence, the Ba, individual soul, the Ib, heart and will, the Ren, name or true identity, and the Shut, shadow or hidden self. Each fragment of Usir represents one of these aspects, scattered across the landscape of consciousness. The journey of Aset, her tireless search to recover the pieces of Usir, is the journey of reintegration that every soul must undertake. It mirrors the path of awakening. We begin fragmented, believing ourselves whole, yet living as pieces of what we truly are. The spiritual path begins with the death of the ego, the recognition that the personality we defend so fiercely is only one fragment of our total being. Like Aset, we must search through the deserts of our psyche to find the lost aspects of ourselves, those exiled, forgotten, or buried by fear and illusion. Yet even Aset cannot find all the pieces. The generative organ of Usir, the symbol of creation, is lost forever, devoured by the fish of the Nile. In this missing piece lies one of the deepest mysteries of all. True reintegration is never a simple restoration. It is not a return to what was, but a recreation, a new synthesis that transcends the past. Aset fashions a golden phallus, a symbol of divine creativity, to complete the body of Usir. Through this act, the myth teaches that wholeness is not about recovering lost innocence. It is about forging something new from the fragments of experience, an alchemical transformation that evolves rather than returns. When Usir is restored, he does not resume his earthly throne. He becomes lord of a new realm, ruler of the unseen world, guardian of the mysteries. Through death and fragmentation, he transcends the limitations of life itself. This is the core alchemical secret of the myth. Transformation requires dissolution. You cannot be reborn without dying, not merely in body, but in identity. The alchemists later called this stage nigredo, the black phase, the symbolic death where all forms dissolve into chaos, making room for the birth of a higher self. The temples of Kemet preserved this initiatic journey through sacred rituals. Candidates for initiation were symbolically dismembered and buried in darkness, enduring silence and fasting until the ego dissolved. Only then could they be reborn into a higher consciousness, emerging not as who they were, but as who they had become. True resurrection, they understood, is not automatic. It must be earned through courage, through surrender, through facing the terror of inner death. In our modern world, this wisdom has been forgotten. We cling to control, to appearances of wholeness, to the illusion that we are not broken. But beneath our polished surfaces, we live in denied fragmentation. The myth of Usir calls to us across millennia. Have the courage to face your own dismemberment, to find your scattered pieces, to die to who you think you are so that you may be reborn into who you truly are. And in this eternal cycle of death and rebirth stands Aset, not as a passive wife or supporting character, but as the active principle of reintegration, the living intelligence that gathers what chaos has scattered. Her very name, meaning throne, signifies the foundation of power, the seat of consciousness itself. She is the cosmic womb, the matrix through which transformation occurs, the voice of creative power that restores balance to the universe. When Aset reassembles Usir's body, she does not merely bind the parts together, she breathes life into them. She speaks sacred words, chants names of power, and vibrates the hidden tones that awaken spirit within matter. In this act lies another great mystery, the power of the spoken word. In Kemet, the word was not mere sound, it was creation itself, vibrations shaping reality. Every hieroglyph, every utterance of a true name, was a doorway through which spirit entered form. To speak the name of Usir was to invoke his presence, to bring him forth again from the unseen. Thus, Aset's act is not prayer, it is mastery. She breathes the divine breath that bridges spirit and matter, life and death, possibility and manifestation. In African spiritual thought, breath is the essence of creation, the Numa, Ruach, Chi, the invisible current that animates the visible. Through word, sound, and breath, Aset restores Usir, and in sacred union with him, conceives Heru, the child of light, the synthesis of continuity and transformation. This union is not symbolic only. It is creative, erotic, and cosmic. From the embrace of the masculine and feminine forces emerges a new consciousness. Usir represents eternal continuity. Aset represents the transformative power of love and wisdom. Heru represents awakening, the reborn awareness that carries both within. This trinity, Usir, Aset, and Heru, is not three separate gods, but three movements of the same eternal process: death, restoration, and transcendence. After Usir's resurrection, Aset's role continues. She protects the infant Heru from the forces of fragmentation, hiding him in the marshes, nurturing him in secret until he is strong enough to face Set. The newborn consciousness, fragile and pure, must be protected from the chaos of the world until it matures. This is a timeless truth. Every transformation must be guarded in silence before it is revealed. The forces that destroy the old will always seek to destroy the new. Aset embodies patience, compassion, and the power of the sacred feminine, a power not of domination, but of preservation, of nurturing, of healing. While masculine energy builds and breaks, the feminine sustains and restores. Her wisdom shows that real power lies in protection and creation, not in conquest. In popular depictions, Usir is often shown as the judge of souls in the Hall of Marat, where hearts are weighed against the feather of truth. But this scene too has been misinterpreted through a Western moral lens, as if it were a courtroom trial, a test of sin and punishment. In truth, it represents the measurement of harmony, the soul's alignment with Marat, the universal principle of order, balance, and reciprocity that governs all existence. The weighing of the heart is not about guilt, it is about resonance. A heart heavy with facade and imbalance cannot rise to the higher realms. The heart that lives in harmony with Marat, light, and true, ascends naturally. Usir, as Lord of Eternity, presides not as a punisher, but as a guardian of cosmic order, a reminder that the universe itself is held together by truth, balance, and transformation. Thus, the myth of Usir and Aset is not a tale of death and mourning. It is a map of inner alchemy, a mirror of the soul's journey through fragmentation, integration, and rebirth. To understand it is to understand ourselves, for every life carries this cycle within. We must die to be reborn, be broken to become whole, be scattered to find the meaning of return. And as long as there is life, death, and transformation, Usir reigns still, not in the tombs, but in the heart of every being who dares to awaken. The weighing of the heart, truth, continuity, and the soul beyond death. In the sacred vision of Kemet, the heart was far more than a vessel for blood or emotion. It was the seat of consciousness, the core of will and moral action, the place where intentions were born and where character took shape. After death, this heart could speak, testify, and reveal the truth of how one truly lived, beyond masks, beyond appearances, beyond the polite lies of social life. When the soul entered the Hall of Marat, the heart was weighed against a single feather, the feather of Marat, symbol of cosmic order, harmony, and truth. That feather, delicate and weightless, held profound meaning. It taught that Marat was not a burden, not an oppressive law to be obeyed through fear, but a state of effortless alignment, of living in accordance with the natural flow of existence. A heart light as the feather was a heart in harmony with life itself, free from deceit, hypocrisy, and contradiction between thought, word, and deed. A heavy heart, however, was one burdened by facade, disorder, and imbalance, weighed down by Isfet, the principle of chaos and dissonance. The judgment of the soul, as depicted in the ancient texts, was never about punishment in the moral or religious sense that later Western systems would impose. It was about natural consequence, the inevitable result of resonance or dissonance with truth. Just as a square shape cannot fit into a round opening, a heart misaligned with Marat cannot enter the eternal realm. Not because it is condemned, but because it is incompatible with that frequency of existence. A soul heavy with Isfet could not endure eternity. It did not descend into eternal torment, for there was no hellfire in this cosmology, only dissolution, the natural return to non-being. The devourer emit, half crocodile, half lion, half hippopotamus, was not a demon of cruelty, but a symbol of that dissolution, of the second death, the return of disharmony into formlessness. And yet, even this dissolution was not punishment. It was simply cosmic balance, the return of what cannot endure truth to the realm of potential. The Egyptians saw in this not fear, but order. They understood that all existence operates through equilibrium, through the law of Ma'at, the self-balancing rhythm of the universe. The negative confessions, often misread by Western scholars as declarations of innocence, were in truth affirmations of alignment. The soul did not beg forgiveness, it affirmed its harmony. I have not killed. I have not stolen. I have not caused pain. I have not wasted water. I have not destroyed necessary trees. I have not been the cause of weeping. Each statement was an expression of Ma'at in action, proof of a life lived in balance with people, nature, and spirit. What stands out most in these affirmations is their ecological awareness. Kemet understood that to harm the natural world was to violate Ma'at itself. The balance of the Nile, the cycles of water and wind, the preservation of life, all were sacred responsibilities. This ancient ecological consciousness recognized that to destroy nature was to destroy oneself. In the Hall of Judgment, Usir, known later as Osiris, did not act as a moral judge delivering verdicts. He simply was. His presence was the living standard, the mirror of truth against which all hearts were weighed. Anubis conducted the soul to the scales, Thoth recorded the results, but it was the scale itself, the immutable law of reality, that determined the outcome. Usir observed, not to condemn or reward, but to witness. In his gaze, self-deception became impossible. This is the true terror of judgment, not punishment, but absolute clarity. To stand in the presence of unfiltered truth is to see oneself as one truly is, without excuses, without disguises. It is the moment when all illusions dissolve, when the heart speaks openly of how life was truly lived. The blessed soul, whose heart was light and pure, entered the field of reeds, the eternal realm of harmony. This was not a paradise granted as reward, but a natural state of belonging. Those who lived in balance simply returned to balance. Those who honored truth simply rejoined truth. The afterlife was not a gift from a god, it was continuity through alignment. To fully understand Usir's role as guardian of this continuity, one must explore Kemet's multi-dimensional vision of the human soul. Unlike the later Western duality of body and soul, the Egyptians saw at least 7 aspects of being, each with its own nature and destiny. There was the Khat, the physical body, the Sohu, the spiritual body, the Ka, the vital essence, the Ib, the heart and consciousness, the Ba, the unique personality, the Ren, the name or true identity, and the Shut, the shadow or hidden aspect. This complexity reflected a deep understanding of existence as multi-layered and interwoven, not confined to a single plane of reality. After death, Usir's role was to preserve and reintegrate these parts, ensuring the soul's continuity beyond the grave. The Ka, often mistranslated as soul, was in truth the vital force, the double that sustained life. It required nourishment, offerings of food, drink, and incense, to maintain its vitality. These rituals were not superstition, but acts of energy exchange. Matter transformed into subtle power through intention and sacred language. The offerings fed the Ka across dimensions, ensuring that the departed could continue to exist in harmony. The Ba, represented as a bird with a human head, was the individual essence, capable of traveling between the realms of the living and the dead. It symbolized freedom and transcendence, the personality unbound by physical limits. When the Ba successfully reunited with the Ka, their union birthed the Ark, the luminous spirit, the transfigured being of light capable of eternal existence in the presence of Usir. This transformation was neither automatic nor guaranteed. It required knowledge, ritual, and initiation, the precise guidance found in the pyramid texts, the coffin texts, and the Book of the Dead. These were not prayers but manuals for spiritual navigation, maps of the unseen designed to guide the soul through its posthumous journey. Every funerary ritual in Kemet was, in essence, a reenactment of Usir's own journey, death, dismemberment, and resurrection. The deceased became one with Usir, not as imitation, but as embodiment of the eternal principle of renewal. To say Osiris Nefertari or Osiris Amenhotep did not mean they were the god himself, but that they had merged with his essence, the principle of life that persists through death. Among the many aspects of the soul, none was more sacred than the Ren, the name. To the ancient Egyptians, the name was not a label, it was the vibration of being, the key to eternal identity. To erase a name was to annihilate existence itself. This is why defacing a pharaoh's cartouche was considered the ultimate crime. It severed the soul's anchor to eternity. Conversely, to speak the name of the dead was to give them life again. To speak the name of the dead is to make them live, said an ancient text, and so it remains in African traditions today. The veneration of ancestors, the calling of their names, the preservation of memory, these are not sentimental gestures but spiritual technologies of continuity. Through remembrance, the dead remain among us. Through invocation, they live in subtle dimensions where the name anchors their presence. Usir, guardian of names, ensured that those who lived in Marat had their Ren preserved forever. His own name has endured for more than 5,000 years, whispered across temples and tombs, surviving empires, invasions, and the erasure of time. And according to his own doctrine, as long as his name is spoken, Usir lives, not as a distant deity, but as a living principle active wherever death transforms into life, wherever endings reveal themselves as beginnings. This is the true immortality that Usir teaches, not the survival of ego, but participation in the eternal. When we let go of the transient and align with the principles that do not die, we too enter eternity, not as observers, but as expressions of it. The paradox is profound. We preserve our individuality only by transcending it. We achieve immortality only by dying to the illusion of separation. And this wisdom is not limited to Kemet. Across the African continent, echoes of this truth resound. In the Congo, the deity Nzambi unites creation and the realm of ancestors, maintaining the bridge between the living and the dead. Among the Yoruba, a Baliwai, lord of earth, transformation, and healing, mirrors Usir's mastery over decay and renewal. The Dogon of Mali tell of Nomo, divine beings of order and rebirth, whose stories of cosmic death and regeneration mirror Kemet's mysteries with astonishing precision. These parallels are not coincidence. They reveal a shared African spiritual continuum, a wisdom that transcended borders and centuries. From Egypt to Mali, from Congo to Ife, from the Nile to the Atlantic, the same principle speaks. Life and death are not opposites but partners. Continuity is not the denial of endings, but their fulfillment. Usir's legacy, then, is not confined to stone temples or faded papyri. It lives wherever transformation occurs, wherever something dies so that something greater may be born. It lives in the seed that becomes a tree, in the night that births the dawn, in the heart that dares to align with truth. For as long as his name is spoken, Usir reigns still, not as God of the dead, but as the eternal law of renewal within every living soul. The eternal transmission of Usir's wisdom. The Nile Valley was never a boundary, it was a highway. For thousands of years, the pharaohs of Kemet came from across Africa, and the dynasties of Nubia ruled the land of the pyramids. The river connected people, cultures, and wisdom from Kush to Punt and beyond. Knowledge, especially spiritual knowledge, traveled with merchants, pilgrims, and kings. The sacred principles that crystallized in Kemet as the mysteries of Usir were not born from nothing along the Nile's banks. They were the result of millennia of African experience, refined and systematized in Kemet, but rooted in older, shared understandings. Across the continent, we find the same spiritual pattern, the reverence for ancestors, the belief that the living and the dead are one continuous community, the understanding that death is not an end but a transformation. The same rituals of death and rebirth repeat from one culture to another, not by coincidence but by common heritage. Usir is the most sophisticated and preserved expression of that ancient African philosophy. When enslaved Africans were torn from their homelands, chained and shipped across the Atlantic, they were forbidden to speak their languages or practice their religions. Everything was done to erase their identity and turn them into property without history or soul. Yet, they carried Usir with them, not as a formal god, but as a principle, a spiritual law engraved in the collective soul. That wisdom, that fragmentation is never final, that destruction prepares renewal, allowed them to survive what should have annihilated them. From the ashes of the diaspora rose new forms of spiritual rebirth, Afro-Brazilian, Afro-Cuban, Afro-Haitian, and Afro-American traditions. These were acts of sacred reconstruction. Like Aset gathering the scattered pieces of Usir's body, the enslaved gathered fragments of memory, ritual, and cosmology to create something new, something alive. They transformed pain into power, loss into legacy, and kept the spirit of continuity alive. Even the Rastafari movement in Jamaica carries this same spiritual DNA. When Rastafarians speak of Zion and Babylon, of returning to Africa and transcending the system of death, they echo, perhaps unknowingly, the very teachings of Usir: death and rebirth, fragmentation and reintegration, past and future collapsing into the eternal now. Pan-Africanism, too, was born from this same understanding. Marcus Garvey, W.E.B. Du Bois, Kwame Nkrumah, and Amilcar Cabral all intuited the Osirian truth, that Africa's fragmentation through colonialism did not destroy its essence. Reuniting the continent was not merely political, it was a spiritual resurrection. In music, literature, and art, the pattern reappears. Miles Davis' Kind of Blue After Silence, rebirth through ego death. John Coltrane's A Love Supreme, spiritual ascension through dissolution. Toni Morrison's Beloved, healing trauma through remembrance. Every work is an echo of Usir's law, that death transforms, that memory restores, that through descent we rise. When movements like Black Lives Matter demand that the names of the dead be spoken, they too invoke ancient wisdom, the power of Ren, the sacred name. To speak the names of the lost is to keep them alive. Usir's legacy lives not in temples of stone, but in every act of remembrance, every ritual of resistance, every effort to heal the fractures of time. Today, the rebirth of Usir is happening again, not as worship of an old god, but as recognition of an eternal principle. The knowledge that once flowed along the Nile is reawakening across the planet. The colonial world that sought to suppress it is entering its own age of disintegration, while Usir's wisdom, cyclical, regenerative, alive, is returning precisely when it is needed most. Western civilization, in its obsession with permanence and control, tried to conquer death through denial. But in denying death, it denied life cycles. It denied Earth's rhythms. And now it faces collapse, ecological, spiritual, political. For every civilization that forgets the necessity of transformation must eventually die to be reborn. And that is the lesson of Usir. Every ending prepares a beginning. Usir returns whenever the world reaches a breaking point, whenever disintegration demands reintegration. His spirit rises not as myth, but as law, the pulse of the universe itself. He lives wherever fragmentation becomes creation, wherever loss births renewal, wherever memory resurrects meaning. Usir is not a forgotten god of a lost civilization. He is the rhythm of existence, the heartbeat of continuity. He lives in the courage of those who rebuild their shattered identities, in the artist who transforms pain into music, in the communities that rise from ruins, and in the souls who face transformation without fear. He lives in every young person who searches for their roots, studies African languages, revives ancestral traditions, and reclaims stolen histories. He lives in the soil where seeds die to be reborn, in the stars that collapse to ignite new light, in the breath between endings and beginnings. For Usir does not ask to be worshipped, he asks to be understood. His message is simple yet eternal. Nothing ends. Everything transforms. What you truly are was never created and can never be destroyed. It only changes form, again and again. Each loss, each death, each crisis is a passage through the underworld, preparing you for rebirth. Every day you die and are reborn in countless ways, through sleep and waking, through heartbreak and healing, through failure and discovery. To honor Usir is not to look back, but to live forward, with awareness, with balance, with merit. To gather your fragments, to restore your wholeness, to live and die consciously. That is resurrection. That is immortality. And when this world as we know it fades, when civilizations crumble and new ones rise, Usir will still be here, alive in every cycle, every soul, every act of renewal. Because Usir is life itself, forever emerging from death, again and again, without end.